You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hi, everyone. This is Stellar Success Podcast. Your host, Dr. Tudor Francu, and I have the pleasure of having a great guest today. Bronson Hill is with me today, and we're going to go over a few things, interesting things together about his history, his success, his mindset, and his habits. Bronson, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's really great to be here, Tudor. I appreciate you and looking forward to talking, man. I always enjoy talking with you, and I feel like it's going to be a high-level conversation.
Awesome. Bronson, Simon Sinek wrote an excellent book, Start With Why. And I love to start my podcast with you, just asking you a simple question. What is your why?
That's a great question. I mean, I think for me, I've got a couple whys. One is my big, hairy, audacious goal, or my why, is to end modern day human slavery in the world. So, I think there's 20 to 40 million human slaves today. It's more than we've ever had in the history of our, or in our history. And so that's a huge issue. The more I learn about it, the more hairy and audacious the issue is. And so it's a big thing. I'm still figuring out how I can engage with it. I'm involved in some causes there and things like that. And then the second one is really being a great dad. I have a daughter who's 11 years old, and I just love being her dad, and I want to be the best dad I can be.
That's great. That's a big why.
Yeah.
Look, our podcast refers the audiences are in general the medical professionals, and how to get some insights of how they can be successful in their medical practice and outside of the medical practice. So I was curious, what is your definition of success in general for you?
For me, I'm sorry. I apologize. There's somebody at the door. Can we pause just a second? I'm sincerely apologize. I'm sorry. Hold
It's
on.
okay.
So to me, I think it is really important to have a definition of what success is. Warren Buffett talks about this. There's the outer scorecard, and then there's the inner scorecard. So the outer scorecard is, how do people perceive me, or how successful do I look? And I think this is a trap. Actually, a lot of, having 10 years I spent in the medical profession, I saw a lot of physicians fall into this as well. You see it with professional athletes that if I'm a physician, I got to drive a certain car. I've got to live in a certain house. I got to take certain vacations. And this is why a lot of physicians never really transition from high income to high net worth, because it's easy to play that game. And so the inner scorecard is very different, right? It's more about, well, what is it that's important to me? What are the values? What are the things that I really want to do, accomplish, to be in my life? And so for me, it really is, it's very personal. It comes down to my faith in God and who I am. And I feel like if there's a purpose God has for my life, if I focus on that and I'm really anchored, and that's my target, anything else is just a distraction, right? So I just want to really be the best version of myself that I can be. I want to love God and love people. And at the end of my life, if I said, hey, I loved people well, and I loved my family well, and I loved people on the outside, and I gave back to others, I think that's a pretty successful thing. So at the end of the day, a lot of people like to put externals on it, that it's got to be a certain dollar figure, or it's got to be a certain achievement or other thing like that. I'm a very achievement-minded person, but I think at the end of the day, it's got to be something stronger than that, or else it really won't carry you through times that are challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have to put value on everything in our lives, right?
Yeah.
Probably one of the best quotes I've read, made me think of what you said right now, is not what you accomplish in your life, is what you become in that process. So tell us a little bit about your medical history, medical life that you had before.
Yeah.
Because I wanna give the audience a chance of relate to how you actually transition from that kind of life to where you are now.
Yeah, so I was a well-paid medical professional. I was in medical device sales for about 10 years. I did a physical therapy device, which was actually located in your town in Severna Park, Maryland, which is kind of funny. And then for about the last 5, 6 years, I worked in surgical devices, and then in the cath lab in cardio devices and things. And so it was really interesting. I really enjoyed a lot of what I did. The thing that I didn't have really was I didn't have, I had a good income, I was making over 200K a year, which for me seemed pretty good. But I didn't have freedom over my time. And a lot of people say, hey, what I really want in life is I really want financial freedom. But if you get below that, it's not the money freedom, it's the time freedom, right? I wasn't able to take time off. And I think a lot of medical professionals can relate that if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. So it's still a time for money trade. And I think that's the challenge. I had a couple doctors, a couple cardiologists that I knew that were making over $2 million a year each, like literally over $2 million a year. They had great practice, whatever. But yeah, they were working 60 or 80 hours a week every week. And I just thought, I don't really envy them. Like, that's great that they, if they're passionate about it, that's great. But I loved, last year, I quit my job a few years ago. And last year I was able to travel 6 times internationally. This year I went to the base camp of Mount Everest, like having these experiences, which is great, and be able to create memories with my
Awesome.
daughter and do things that are fun. So I think that, for me, I'm really grateful for my background. I'm grateful for the things I learned. I'm grateful I was able to help people. But I think that, the idea of passive income or really growing wealth outside of what you do actively, and that's the subtitle of my book, Fire Yourself, is replace your working income with passive income in 3 years or less. That there's a big difference between income that you work for, right, than actually income that works for you, right? That your money actually goes to work for you. And as Warren Buffett would say, unless you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. And I've thought about that for
That's right.
years. And so now it's kind of fun to actually have investments that actually work for me, even when I'm not working them. And that's the part that a lot of professionals, especially medical professionals, I think really it's a message we all should learn.
Yeah, that's a great message, and this is why I do what I do. Also, I am trying to help people understand that it's not only how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Yeah.
And all these passive income streams that you can develop during your life can keep you afloat and give you freedom at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
But you are by definition, I would say, from many angles, a successful person. What do you think are the skills and the habits that got you to this point?
This is something that's been interesting to me for a long time. I think for me, there's been a number of things that have been helpful, just really creating a goal. It sounds simple, but when I decided that, hey, I'm going to leave my job in 3 years, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had a little bit of real estate stuff that I did, but I just kind of said, I'm going to commit to this. It's that decision, it is in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped, as Tony Robbins would say.
Yeah.
We make a decision. That was a big one. And then I have this saying that life has an action bias, meaning if you with your great ideas and your whiteboard and all the things you're going to do someday, I will, someone who takes action will always beat that person. Because if you're
Yeah.
taking action, little actions, and then you go back and reflect and, okay, this didn't work, whatever, and you keep taking action, you go after it, like, you'll figure it out along the way if you just keep taking enough action. And it's not just like bullheaded action, you just keep doing the same thing forever, but you go back and then you say, okay, did this work or did this not work? And then you go back and reflect. And
Yeah,
so I think
I
that's
kind of want to stop you here because you said something very interesting. It's not only about action, it's about how you reflect about your
yeah.
action. And I'm definitely a person who stops in my tracks a lot of times and think about what I'm doing. What is your what is your approach on that? Do you take time off just to like reflect and think?
Yeah, I do. I actually schedule it. That's one of the reasons I do a lot of vacation. I'm going to Ireland next week for a week, is that I just try to shut it down for a while. And what it does is it really allows me to just kind of get the journal out, to reflect, to think about. I'll get once a quarter, I go away on a 2-day retreat, and I'll just go to the mountains somewhere or get some activity in, and I'll get a whiteboard and I'll just reflect and think and pray and journal and just like think about, okay, what are my goals? What am I trying to do right now? And how am I making progress on this? Because it's so easy to be, to work in your business that you're not working on your business, right? Michael Gerber, the
Yeah.
book that E-Myth talks about that is you don't want to be, and I think for a lot of physicians or a lot of professionals in the medical field, we're just working in the business, even if it's our business, we're just somebody who's a cog in the business versus actually taking a step back. And it's that reflection process you're talking. We mentioned, I was sharing that when you can take a step back and you say, well, is this really getting me where I want to go? So it's work on in the business and do the stuff, whatever, but then take a step back and say, well, I don't know if this is really it. And so I'm constantly, one of the things I'm doing is I'm constantly trying new things. I'm very willing to fail at something. I've tried many, many things that have failed. And I remember this quote from Michael Jordan where it says, I've missed 50,000 shots. I've taken the game winning shot 57 times and missed, and I've done this and this and this. And it's like, and he said, and that's why I'm successful, right? It's just the fact
Yeah.
that he keeps taking shots. And so for all is if we just keep
Well,
working
yeah,
at
I
it,
mean, you can be successful without failing, right? It's
yeah.
it's one of the things that it's inherent to success.
But I think for physicians or a lot of medical professionals, it's really hard. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about this too, is because we're taught in school that there's one right answer. And versus in life, there's many right, you can do in business, you can have many ways to do so. There's so many ways you can do things. And if you collaborate in school, it's called cheating, right? Versus, if you
Right.
collaborate in business, like, oh, we all work together. So it's just interesting the things that sometimes that made us successful in the workplace are actually the things that can keep us from going to the next level. And that's why it says, a lot of A students will work for C students. So a guy like Richard
Right.
Branson, who is dyslexic and is told he's stupid when he's in school, starts 200, 300 companies because he's okay with taking that level of risk tolerance. And so anyway, so I think with a lot of it, it can be challenging for a lot of people. I imagine for a lot of listeners too, your listeners that, have been high achievers their whole life. And you have to be comfortable, at least in my opinion, being willing to fail, being willing to try. And I call them low risk experiments, Tudor. If you're willing to
Yeah.
go just try something, if this thing I'm trying over here, if it doesn't work, then I'm out maybe a little bit of money, a little bit of time, but it's not, I learned something, right? So it's this constant never ending improvement journey. And I think a lot of times we miss that. And that's where I think that's one of my strengths and I see for a lot of wealthy people, the same thing. I actually was able to interview over 2,500 millionaires individually over the last 4 or 5 years. And this is the book I'm writing right now called Rich Brain, How the Wealthy Changed Their Brain to Change Their Bank Account. And it really is fascinating. There's this belief that people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, or they either have money or they don't. But the facts are just the opposite. It's actually 86% of the time, millionaires are self-made, according to a 2019 Fidelity investment study. And so it's really this, it's a mindset, it's a learned mindset habit, and then it's specific actions that people do that actually create a different outcome for them. So if
Yeah.
whatever you're doing in life, if it's not working, it's not getting the result you want, in our minds, we can just kind of forward and say, if I keep doing this for the next 10 or 20 years, I can kind of predict what's going to happen. So unless you want to
Right.
do that and have that happen, then you have to start trying
Some
different things to have
people
a different outcome.
some people call that risk, taking a risk. And the word risk for some people, it's terrifying. It,
Yeah.
it paralyzes them. And I want to kind of get back to you and say, ask you, you probably took a lot of risks in your life, doing different things or jumping from one career to another. And I know you're very involved in multifamily for a while. When you took that risk, what did you think? Because you had no idea what's going to happen.
No, I
How
was
did you evolve from what you were to where you want to go?
Well, to be honest, it started for me. I had been doing single family. I wanted to scale it up to 30 houses. I had 4 or 5. My cousin was like, "Hey, why don't you do multifamily?" I said, "I don't have the money." He said, "You can raise the money." So I started kind of doing this on the side where I found a partner and we kind of started working together and I helped we raise $15 million together over the next 18 months while I was still working my full-time job. So I was kind of hustling and doing this
Yeah.
lunchtime, morning time after taking a Tuesday off and just do whatever I could. And so it was very successful in that sense. But when it came to actually leaving my job, I was making more money actually in the real estate than I was making in doing, the actual the medical sales. But it was terrifying to me because I didn't have any family members that they were all saying, "You have this job." I had the golden handcuffs. You have this great job. Why would you ever leave your great job? And all my friends, everybody was saying the same thing. And then I got in an entrepreneurs group. And there's a saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So there's literally 5 other guys, and we were in this group. I was in this group for about a year and a half, but about a year in, I just said, well, I want to leave my job. Here's how my business works. And without exception, every single one of these guys said, you should leave your job pretty much as soon as possible And one guy was like, well, and if it doesn't work, you could always go back to medical sales. And I
Yeah,
just, for some reason in my mind, I just didn't even connect like, oh, if it doesn't work, I always go back to medical sales. Like it just really didn't
exactly.
even, so it's funny how like,
You had to get out of your comfort zone.
totally. And that's where like I think mindset is such a big piece. And Tony Robbins will say about 80% of success or achievement is psychology. And I think it's
Yeah,
just so true. It's so true. How we see ourselves, how we see the world, how we show up. That's why powerful people, Elon Musk, some of the best leaders in the world, they show up and the world just kind of like adapts to things that are impossible happen because they've approached it with a mindset that's like, well, why is it impossible? Why can't we do this? Why can't we go to Mars? Why can't we do? And so I think in life, it's very similar. We're confronted with limitations, but if we really play out what the fear is, a lot of times it's kind of a fight or flight thing that we can't see an option for. So it's great being around
yeah,
people that have done it, and that was super helpful for me.
that's awesome, man. I'm definitely a fan of like getting out of your comfort zone and put yourself in environments that are not necessarily comfortable because they make you grow. And
Yeah,
if you don't grow, you die, right?
yeah, for sure.
So, as part of your like transition to where you are right now, you know, you're not only a professional, you're a human being. And us as medical professionals tend to kind of stick to what we know what to do, like in our profession, in our field, whatever it is. But it's also a sum of things around us, our health, our nutrition, our fitness. How do you approach these things to become, the best version of yourself, basically?
Yeah, so I think, you have to look holistically. Being in the medical field and working with patients that had, peripheral arterial disease or coronary artery disease. It's just, I saw so many cases where people, were 60 and they were on death's door, or they were 50s. And it's just the choices we make do impact us over time. I mean, Jeff Olson in this book, The Slight Edge, it's a great
Yeah,
book. He talks about just the little choices we make. If I smoke, it's not going to kill me today or tomorrow or in 5 years, but over 20, 30 years, that's going to have a dramatic negative impact on my life. Versus if I read for 10 or 15 minutes a day and I do that every
right.
single day, it's going to have this huge, amazing connection. It's going to teach me a lot. So same with our health. I think that it's, for me, I try to work out usually about an hour a day. So I'll do sometimes, I try to walk every morning for 25 minutes and I'll try to do a HIIT class or I'll do yoga. I've traditionally been a runner. I'm having some knee issues right now, so I'm trying to kind of rehab that. But the older I get, the more I realize I'm kind of always rehabbing something, and I love going so hard at it. But it's just
Yeah.
finding things that really allow us to push ourselves, really grow physically. And it's again, I found a huge benefit to having physical goals. And then how it plays over into other goals. So for me, one of the things I love is the cold plunge. A lot of people think you're absolutely crazy. Why would you sit in an ice bath? I've actually got one at my
Yes.
house. So I go in there, if it's 40 degrees, and I go in there for 5.5 minutes and I come out and I feel amazing. And it helps with recovery and different things. But there's a mindset piece. Once you've done that,
Yeah.
your mind, you're subconsciously, you get to know somebody for yourself. Like the way you see yourself subconsciously is that you do hard things. And so when
Yes.
something
You
else comes
conquer your
along that's
fears, right?
yeah, exactly. And something else comes along that's hard. It's like, well, this is just another thing, And
Yeah.
so writing a book or writing a second or, going on a trip or doing speaking or whatever the things are, it's like, well, that's all like, I mean, the cold plunge is probably harder than that, right? So once I've done that,
Yeah.
so I think
Right.
it's not just going pay for pain's sake, but doing things that are healthy for us, pushing ourselves in ways, physically that really help us. I think it really helps to expand the mindset as well.
That's awesome. You're talking about reading books and listening to different authors and stuff. I know you're a big reader, and anybody successful in general is a big reader. You are what you read, right? Um, what are some of the books that you love that kind of pushed you forward?
Yeah.
Podcasts, shows, anything that comes into your life to make you better.
Yeah, thanks. A great question. Yeah, I think books are really unique. They really are. They're like a tutor, right? That I get to just like you're a tutor, but I mean, like a tutor that helps, like a personal teacher that's going to help us along the path of whatever we want to learn. And the
Yeah,
return on time or the return on investment is incredible. If I read a book, it took somebody hundreds, and my book took hundreds of hours to write. For some, it takes thousands of hours, right? So I can literally read this book in a few hours or 4 or 5 hours to listen to it. And I can get, 100x return on my time. This person did all this research on these things. So I found that, I do like podcasts. I have a podcast, The Mailbox Money Show. I listen to some podcasts as well. I love books though, because I think that, and I listen to a lot of books. So I listen to them. I'm able to speed it up a little bit to go 2 to 3 times as fast. At the beginning, it sounds stressful, but over time you kind of get a little
right.
used to it, and I can retain pretty well. But I find just, having, really great books, a couple that I like. One is called Never Split the Difference by it's by a former FBI hostage negotiator named Chris Voss. And I got to have lunch with him one time, and just, this is the idea of how negotiations work, how it works working with people. All that stuff is valuable. That's a great book. There's a book that I talked about the connection between personal growth and business growth. So for me, going through personal challenges or crisis or whatever, and I found this book called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené
Mhm.
Brown, which is basically, how do you live a more wholehearted life? You could have all the money in the world, you have all the success in the world, but you could be a
Right.
miserable person. You could have just relationships that are terrible. You have all these things. So I think that it's this idea of, how do you live a life that's authentic, that you show up in a way that, you're courageous even when you don't know the outcome, and you just live from a place of the heart. I think that's really important. I think people really get that. They say that there's actually a much greater success, a greater parallel between, the EQ, which is emotional quotient, rather than IQ, right? There are a lot of people with
Mhm.
very high IQs that they just have no, real success in life. But people with high EQ, they really, they can have, some of them have very high success. So I think those are a couple of books I really liked. But I think just, again, having biographies, something that happened 100 years ago in a biography, I can apply that to my life today. Personal development books. I read a lot of different things, listen to a lot of different books, but it sounds like you do as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of my passions too. But it's interesting what you said, because we're all emotions, right? So at the end of the day, it's how you feel that counts,
Yeah.
and how you feel about the other person, if you can help the other person or not, how the other people react to you. So I like that concept that you told us about. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit towards the financial aspect of your life, I would say. And I know you're very involved in different types of investments right now, but for a medical professional who has a steady job, a W-2 job, goes to see the patients every day, comes back home, he's very happy with what he's doing. But there's a lot of talk about, and we talk a lot about, different types of income and passive income streams and all this stuff that can help them financially. What would be your advice for someone who is starting to think about those things? Do you have any preference on how you would advise them to start investing or build a passive income stream from something?
Yeah.
How do you see those things for them?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I think the book, Fire Yourself Behind Me, this is a book I wrote really for that reason of just, what does the person do that, has $1 million or more and wants to get started? And how do I, what's step one, two, three? Well, I think a lot of it is you have to just be willing to learn, great shows like your show, Tutor, and just being willing to get in. And, I realized the more I could learn, it normalized things for me that I just didn't know anything about, right? It was, for me, the word syndication. I remember actually when I first heard the term, it was probably about 10 years ago. And I was like, I have two references for that. One is like a crime syndicate, and the other one is like a syndicated TV show. That was the only thing I was like, what is syndication? But then the more I learned about it, like, oh, okay, this actually seems comfortable. So I think that, just because it's something new doesn't mean that it's something that's, couldn't really benefit you. So I think the learning, really evaluating, there's a lot of, yeah, I think Tony Robbins has a good, number of good books on finance as well that just kind of introduce the idea of alternative investing. And so, um, I think the learning, the asking the questions, I encourage people to go to meetups. People go to
Hmm.
local meetups. If you don't live in an area where there are local meetups, or even if you do, go to conferences. There's a conference coming up the end of August called Limitless. There's one called MFIN in Denver in September. I'll be at, like, so these are conferences I go to and I'm a part of because I meet amazing people. And just there's
Yeah,
something that happens when you're in the room and somebody says, "Oh yeah, I used to do this," or "I was a physician and now I do mobile home park investing." And I like, well, how did that work? What was it? There's a story there, right? And so as you hear it,
yeah,
and what was the thing? And I'm thinking, like, what's their superpower that allowed them to be able to do this? And what was,
right,
did they get lucky somewhere, or what were the things that they did, or what were the things they failed in? And it's
right.
just it's
Real
just a
real life examples.
exactly, yeah. So I think
Yeah,
there's the two things that really help people the most are networking and education. So I kind of mentioned them. Like we get about the books and the podcasts and that kind of thing, but the networking is it's huge. I mean, I was at an event and I had raised $100,000 for one deal, and I was trying to get going with bigger stuff. And I approached a guy who was a big influencer, and we created this partnership and raised 15 million together, right? And that was
yeah,
transformational for me. So I think, being willing to learn and grow. And again, not everyone wants to be as active as I've been or you've been, but have a podcast and have a show and be an investor in that way. But I just think, going and asking the questions and learning about it. And there's a whole process I have in the book. I talk about too, how do you analyze any deal and any asset class? And I think it's important to know what
yeah.
you're looking for.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend your book. Um, and finally, it's up to the simple curiosity of someone who wants to do something else, right? Because if you have that kind of drive to learn something new, you educate yourself. Um, I did the same thing when I came in the United States. I'm an immigrant and I had no idea what's going to happen and what, I have no idea about a financial system. And I started educating myself. And, um, I definitely agree with what you said. If you want to start something, just educate yourself first. That would be the
Yeah.
first step. Um, I want to kind of ask you a little bit about your future goals and what's exciting for you and presently. What are you looking for and what's burning up in your soul right now
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
project?
Yeah, well, we got a couple things we're doing right now that I'm really excited about. We just started a mastermind group called the Wealth Forum. We had our first meeting last week. I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but we just started it. It's for net worth of 2 to 10 million or more, and we've got a handful of people in there. And we had our first one day in person meeting, and it's just so fun. It's just like, again, I think
Yeah,
for people that are passive investors, I know you and I and we all want to help people that are passive investors, but I'm biased. I want everybody to do our deals, right? And so the only person that's really not biased in the financial world is really another passive investor. And so it's getting some of these people in the room together to really create these lifelong friendships and relationships. So somebody can say, "Hey, I've worked with these guys for 10 years. It's been awesome. I've worked with, I would never work with these guys over here." And just being
yeah,
honest about where they're at. So I think that's been really awesome. And so, excited for that. I'm also excited to actually getting back into. We actually took a little break from multifamily where we weren't really doing new deals just because of the rates rising so quickly,
right.
and so we have a new multifamily partner we're working with that we're just really excited about, and we're seeing stuff discounted, in some cases over 30% of where they were 2 or 3 years ago. You look at everything is like groceries and gas and all this stuff, it's 50% more expensive than it was 4 years ago. But we're seeing discounts on some of the stuff that's 30% less than it was 4 or 5 years ago in some cases. And so I'm really loving, buying an asset that's really in demand. The debt's a little funny right now, but we think that eventually rates may start to come down. And whether they do or not, there's still going to be incredible demand for this asset class. And
Yeah,
that's
I
why we
agree with
love
that. It's a
housing.
great
Yeah.
opportunity for multifamily in general right
Yeah.
now because, it's probably just the start of the tip of the iceberg, I would say.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
would you have any um, three things that you would recommend to someone who wants to step in your footsteps?
Well, I would say on the active side, if somebody wants to, because again, I look at it, there's kind of two paths, people that have more money than they have time. So I'd say if I have more than $1 million, a couple $1 million, it might be worth just exploring passive investing because, you can leverage your time, you leverage your wealth more than your time. If you're like me and you're like, hey, I didn't have $1 million net worth and was making good money, but I wanted to kind of branch out, there's a lot of ways to do it. And it really is the same couple things, whether you're active or passive. It's the networking and the education. And then I think one thing that really helped me before I had that conversation with that person who became a partner of mine, I was at a table at this investing cruise. I paid, $6,000 or $7,000 to go for a week on this investor cruise, and Robert Kiyosaki was there, and it was amazing. And it was a lot of fun. There were a couple hundred people, but at one of the round tables they had, there was a guy who said, it's like that quote, make yourself valuable to valuable people. And I kind of thought, I was like, make yourself valuable to valuable people. And this is a paraphrase from the motivational speaker, Jim Rohn. And it's just the idea of like, valuable people are people that are providing a lot of value in the marketplace. So I was thinking, well, who gives value to me? Well, it's this guy. Well, what can I do to help solve a problem to them? So if we find people that are at the next level or a couple levels up of success, and instead of going to them and say, hey, mentor me, teach me, help me, you kind of think about their business and what they're doing and say, is there a way that my skill set or what I have or a connection that I have or something that I can give to them or resource, is there a way that I can help them? And that's one of the best partnership ways that I found, is just to be someone who's always asking the question, how can I serve this person? How can I help them? Can I connect them with a book, a resource, a person, anything that will help them to get where they want to go? And so, and it really sets you, even if you can't help them, it really sets you apart if you approach somebody who's very successful like that. So when I go to conferences, I'm speaking at a conference coming up, I was really honored to be speaking at Limitless, which I'm super honored to be speaking there. But like, there's a lot of people there that are uber successful that I want to just really show up and say, how can I serve this person? And again, that's what really, I think, sets someone apart and really gives opportunity for someone to say, hey, I really want to work with this person who just wants to be a giver and wants to help. Like, they're not thinking about what they can get out of it. They just want to help.
Yeah, that's a great concept, Bronson. I love that. I think, most people don't think like that.
No.
It's first what you do for someone else than what you do for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's always comes back to you in a way or another, probably 10 times more, right?
Totally.
I love our conversation. I want to be respectful of your time, and just want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you and, learn more from your wisdom and success?
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's really been fun talking with you as well. And I think we have the Bald Brotherhood as well. So
I know.
that's good. So I have my book, Fire Yourself, which is on Amazon. You can pick that up. It's become an Amazon bestseller, which is great. I also have a free gift for your audience. So if it's basically a guide of how to use inflation to your advantage. So they say inflation is only 3%. I think it's still actually significantly higher than that. And there's a way that you can get on the other side of the equation. Obviously, owning real estate is one of those. There's also some strategies I have that you probably never heard about, using precious metals and using good debt and things like this. And so if you want to get that, you can text the word inflation to 33777. So the word inflation to 33777, and then you can get a free copy of that. And it's about 40 pages.
Awesome.
And I just would love to share that with the audience.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope we can catch up soon then, later on.
Thanks, Tudor. Really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. Look forward to connecting again soon.
Take care.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.